Yeah, everybody, welcome back. You'll see this video on Wednesday as I'm recording this Tuesday night. And this video is in response to a poll that I put up earlier today asking the question, are we on the verge of a civil war? But before I answer that, I want to put something out there and see what you all think about this idea that I have here. Imagine that there is no mainstream media, that all of us are completely unplugged from that. No mainstream media going right now, talking about one side or the other. Imagine what Facebook and Instagram would look like without one side, corporate backed, pushing propaganda. You need to join our side and fight against this side. Imagine the other side. No corporate backing, no propaganda, none of that leaking onto Facebook, none of that leaking onto Instagram. Imagine that was gone for 30 days. Just imagine for a minute how fast the tensions of this entire situation would de-escalate. How fast, if this had happened a year ago, would there have even been a shooting? I think most of us could positively answer that that would be a solid no. Would one side feel like it had to be at the throat of the other side? No. Would people really even begin to feel like they were on a side? Probably not. One thing that I've noted, most people do not want to be at war with their neighbor. Most people do not relish the idea because they have some degree and semblance of sanity going on in their head that the last thing that we need is to be fighting with each other. That the only way for it to de-escalate is to step away from the propaganda. Start listening to either people that are talking reason, start unplugging from mainstream media that is literally fueling this constantly every single day. And even some people here on YouTube, but definitely anytime I've looked at Facebook or Instagram, I end up just shutting it down. I do film work and I post stuff about that, and I try to avoid this like crazy, simply because everybody wants you to be angry from one side or the other. But I posit this question: would we even have had this event happen with Charlie Kirk, where he was assassinated, had mainstream media been nipped in the bud or prevented from spreading propaganda or pushing either side even a year ago? I don't think we would. For those of you watching, if you were to unplug from that, how fast would you start to feel like your life was going, starting to develop some form of peace? If you avoid Facebook and Instagram, where everybody's posting about that everywhere, or anybody that you see even on YouTube. Now, I have to say, most of the people that I've seen on YouTube have had at least somewhat of a sane response. There are some that I've encountered, I don't know who you see, some of which are not being very sane about this at all, but some of them are saying, wait a minute, why do I need to be enemies with my neighbor? And if they weren't watching mainstream media and I was not watching mainstream media, how quickly would we get along? We wouldn't care. If your neighbor was trans, you wouldn't really care. They would want to work a steady job, be able to take care of themselves in their life, and be able to do things that they enjoy doing. And you would do the same, and you would probably be kind to each other because you wouldn't really care about trying to be at odds with each other, because you wouldn't be thinking along those lines, because no one would be pushing you to. And I keep coming back to the proverbial jar with the red ants and the black ants. We're the red ants or the black ants or whatever, and they're shaking the jar. Someone is shaking the jar saying, you two need to be fighting each other. The most important thing is when we ask, wait a minute, who's shaking the jar? Why do they want us to be enemies with each other? The best way to deal with even the idea of this erupting into a violent conflict, which anybody that has any familiarity with violence knows the insanity of it, erupting on our streets, in our neighborhoods, Everybody's at odds and enemies with everybody else. Your neighbor down the street is now your enemy. Think about the reality of that. The heartache, the misery, the bloodshed, absolute insanity. Throwing around terms like civil war like it's something that you should relish. This is why I asked the question earlier, because I'm wondering how many of you, and I did find it refreshing that many of you were questioning this, going, why should I be in the middle of a fight with these people? Isn't mainstream media pushing this all over the place? And if they weren't doing this, if we weren't being propagandized from one side to the other, would there have even been a shooting? Would there be any real tension? Hasn't this been happening a lot, especially since 2012? Any of you that are familiar with that? The big push and shove towards all the fighting about what you identify as, and all these different social issues that really nobody was talking about because they were starting to focus on the reality that we had a lot of corruption going on. And if all of us were to begin to realize that the jar is being shaken and that the red ants and the black ants are being encouraged to fight each other over differences that they don't actually even have, at what point will we start to realize that our very livelihood is being stripped from us by people that don't want us to pay attention to it? And you know what I mean from all the other videos that I put up. You're realizing you don't make enough to live. You have to work 2, 3 jobs, or you've lost your job and you're desperately trying to find a job in a market where there just isn't any jobs to be found. Definitely food for thought. But when it comes to the idea of taking up arms against a fellow American, or anybody really, it's absolutely unnecessary. Think about this. How much time are you spending listening to mainstream media? Looking at posts on Facebook and Instagram where people are riling each other up? Maybe even listening to certain types of creators on Facebook that are actually pushing that narrative. And how many times are people saying, wait, step back, do some critical thinking here. Why should we be fighting with them? Why is this getting ramped up? And every time another event happens, it gets ramped up even more. And now think about a scenario where it's all unplugged, and you'll realize very, very quickly all of the tensions, all the talk of a civil war, all of that de-escalates fast. And it would never come back. It would never come back if it was all permanently unplugged. Now, I realize that's not a reality. There are going to be people that are going to be watching those things no matter what. But if you unplug from it, how much peace would you have? How much critical thinking would start to return to your mind if you're not watching any of the mainstream media channels? How better would you sleep at night? You wouldn't feel at odds or on edge about your neighbor and what you disagree or don't maybe see eye to eye with them, because you're just not walking around thinking about that type of strife and that type of conflict, because it's not being pushed on you like propaganda. Definitely food for thought. Well, if you like this video, absolutely please share it with people. Let's keep this conversation going. Make sure to like, subscribe, hit the notification bell. I've got a community going. If you want to join that, it's in the description below. And I look forward to talking to you all again soon.